Shabbat shalom, everybody. Today, the portion is phenomenal. Tissa, and I've entitled it "Truth and Consequences." I think that used to be a program. Anyway, it begins with the Lord telling Moses, "When you take a census of the children of Israel, every man shall give kaper nafsho leyud he vav he, a ransom, literally a covering or a cover for his soul to the Lord, so that there would be no plague among them." So I wondered about this plague. Then I looked it up and I went to Rashi, who referred me to 2 Samuel 24, which begins with, "And again the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. So he moved the heart of David to take a census." Rashi said that David hadn't asked for that required half shekel. It was not a free will offering. Perhaps his motives were to see whether he was successful as a king. Now, David's uncle Yochanan, his military commander, questioned him, but he complied. It took over 9 months to bring the count to David. Then David realized that he had sinned, and he begged the Lord to remove his sin. But despite God's forgiveness, David had to witness the consequence of his action. A plague fell upon his people that took the lives of 70,000 men. There are consequences for our disobedience to God's commandments, even if they don't always make sense to us. For example, when we tell a child not to stick anything into an electrical outlet, he may not understand, but it's for his good. That's what a chok is. In Exodus 30, 20 and 21, before Aaron and his sons entered the tent of meeting, they had to wash their hands and feet so that they would not die. Like the half shekel, this is also a chok, olam, a statute forever, throughout all our generations. This too doesn't seem to make sense. But let's look at the consequences for the future generations. We know how Jews in the Middle Ages were accused of causing the Black Death. Since so few of our people died when the death rate kept climbing among the common people, the living conditions in medieval towns and overcrowding in houses encouraged the spread of diseases. Poor sanitation in cities created breeding grounds for rats that carry this disease, this plague. From the Torah, Jews had learned the importance of washing their hands, as well as many other methods of sanitation. But would the people have listened to them? Who were they then? Again, consequences. Both the half shekel, given as a requirement at any census taking, and the washing of hands saved us from plagues. What plagues are hitting us today? Are they the same plagues that hit Egypt? Didn't God tell us in Exodus 15:26 that if we obey his commandments, his mitzvot, and all his statutes, his chukim, none of those diseases that he put upon the Egyptians would touch us? God has not changed his mind today. We say that he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And we show our trust in him when we are obedient to his commandments, not out of fear because he's a harsh taskmaster like Pharaoh, but out of love because he's a loving father who wants to protect his children from the evils of the world. This Torah is a book of life, not a book of death. The parasha continues in Exodus 30:15 with, "The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than 1/2 shekel when they give an offering to the Lord." Again, to make lekaper nafshechem, a covering for your souls. This phrase sounded so mystical to me. I can see it as being a picture of the physical body covering the spiritual one, the soul, both of which God created. And if we look at it at a deeper level, lekaper means that he will cover our sins when we acknowledge our disobedience and come to him. Even the Kohanim had to do that. In other words, he's got us covered. Excuse me. All he asks is that we obey his commandments willingly. God knows our hearts. He knows our kavanah, our intentions. Later in this portion, Moses would beg God to turn his burning anger away from destroying our people. And he listened. Doesn't he listen to us today? The rich and the poor both had to give the same amount, showing us that we are all equal in value. God leveled the playing field, excuse me, so that no one could boast of their financial position or feel less because they were poor. Who gave us the shekels? The Egyptians who wanted us gone. We are never asked to give from what we don't already have. I remember when our rabbi asked us, why only a half a shekel and not a full one? He said that it depicts that we are only half the person we are meant to be until God supplies the other half. This shekel can be understood as our role in life. For example, in chapter 31, God speaks of Bezalel. I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. Together with Aholiab and the hearts of all who are wise-hearted, he has placed wisdom that they may make all that God has commanded of us, of you, Moses. So God chooses people in whom he infuses gifts and talents. The idea of giving is incorporated in this word gift. If we hide that gift within us, that talent, or keep it just for ourselves, we will never have a sense of fulfillment. It's meant to be used for the betterment of the community in which we live. What are the consequences of that? I believe more than we realize, far more. The Shabbat is the very next thing that God speaks about. We can never understand the fullness of Shabbat. This is the fourth commandment, and it's called also a chok, which is a commandment or a statute which doesn't always make sense to us, but we're told to keep. Now, the Shabbat is not simply a day of rest, because he introduces it as a sign that you may know that I am the Lord who sets you apart. Whoever doesn't keep it is cut off from the community and dies. Sounds harsh, but if your hand is cut off from its source of life, the body, it will die, not the rest of the body. So being cut off from the community at that time in the desert meant certain death. Being cut off from God is far worse. Again, consequences. Next, Israel's gravest sin that haunts us to this very day, the Egel Zachav, the sin of the golden calf. How could they have done this after they had witnessed so many of God's miracles? There are many conjectures, many thoughts that our rabbis give us. One of them is that fear and abandonment overtook them because of their past. Isn't that true of us today? We can be so excited about something we know that God has done in our lives, and in the very next minute, we're weeping and wailing, and we're not trusting the same God we just praised moments ago. But look what happened next. As soon as Moses saw what was happening to the people, he said to the Levites, every man shall put his sword on his thigh and go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay his brother, his companion, and his neighbor. And the sons of Levi did as Moses commanded, and about 3,000 men fell there that day. again, consequences. I said before that the Torah is a book of life. And here in Exodus 32:32, another book is introduced. God was about to destroy all the Israelites and make a new people like he did at the time of Moses. And Moses begged God, he pleaded for his people. He said, now, if you will forgive their sin, and if not, I beg you, blot me out of your book, which you have written. I wondered about this book that Moses referred to. In Judaism, it's called HaSefer HaChaim, the Book of Life. David spoke of it in Psalm 68 when he was at a very dark place in his life. He wrote, let them, meaning his enemies, be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. It's also in Daniel 12:1. At that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands beside the children of your people, will appear. And there will be a time of trouble, the likes of which has never been since the nation came into being. At that time, your people shall be delivered, every one who shall be found inscribed in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to reproach and everlasting abhorrence. But they who have knowledge of God shall shine as the bright expanse of the sky, and they who lead the many to righteousness shall be as the stars forever and ever. The key to this righteousness, is found in the wisest and most important words that mankind would ever hear, God's 10 Commandments. Twice in this portion, we read that they were written in stone by the finger of God. Let's not believe those who put Moses on a godlike pedestal, saying that he was a wise man who wrote them himself. That opens the door for other men to be considered like gods, wiser than God, the God of Israel. In Exodus 32, verse 33, we read a very important principle. And God said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Him will I blot out of my book. Let's not be fooled into believing that anyone else can pay for our sins. The Torah repeats that we are responsible. We're living in a time when everyone is a victim, blaming teachers, parents, the government, or whatever for their lot in life. And instead of learning how to use their gift of free will and assume responsibility and the consequences for their actions, it's far easier to blame others. That's usually when people look for a scapegoat. And who's usually the most popular choice for that? The Jews. We become the cause of all the problems in the world because people have to blame someone. Hitler understood that. And this ideology today is spreading throughout the Middle East and to the rest of the world. Hating the Jews is a spiritual problem for which the consequences are immense. The Torah tells us that the kings of Israel were responsible for having the Torah read to the people so they would know how to live. The kings of the world today, including the king of Israel, and most of the leaders are not interested in what God has to say. Rather, they have set themselves up to be demigods. You and I may not be responsible for leading multitudes like Moses and King David, but we can be responsible for those in our own circle of influence by keeping the principles that we learned from these stories. Perhaps this would be enough to turn away the anger of the Lord burning against the people of the world. In the last chapter of this parasha, in Exodus 34:10, God said, behold, I make a covenant. I will do marvels in front of all your people, such as have not been produced in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among you shall see the work of the Lord that I am about to do with you, that it is tremendous. Moses saw the Lord do tremendous things for Israel in his day. In the same way that God parted the Sea of Reeds when Israel was being chased by Pharaoh's army, could God not make a way for us in the toughest of situations? I see that in my life, and I'm amazed. Another army is chasing Israel right now. But we know that it will end like Pharaoh's army, destroyed like all the armies throughout the ages who have chased us. It seems to be a double-edged sword, however. Our behavior, our disobedience, causes the burning anger of God for which there are consequences. Yet at the same time, our loving Father in heaven says that he will cover our souls, kaper nafshechenu. He will protect us when we walk in his ways and are obedient to his commandments. Excuse me. So let's not live in fear about what's going to happen, but focus on how to live each and every day and how to bring a spirit of light to this beautiful world that once again is being bombarded by a dark spirit. Shabbat Shalom.